Hello, good morning. You're watching QTV this morning. I am Ibrahim Balde. We are back again on another edition of your favorite morning program, and we are broadcasting from our studios on Kairaba Avenue, West Africa, the Gambia. And to our followers in the Diaspora, we are sending love and likes to you and a cup of coffee. It's it's a bit cold Wednesday morning. And, you know, this morning I discussed with my boss and was like, okay, it's very cold. And, you know, I think a good cup of coffee it's going to do this morning. And I'm pretty sure Mr. Mboj have taken his first dose of coffee this morning. On this platform, I'm with Julde Njai. Always a pleasure to share this platform with her. Julde, how are you?
I am fine. I'm doing
How
pretty
is
well.
everything going?
It's going fine. Alhamdulillah. I can't complain. It's, you know, it's a lot though.
when I look at the women here at QTV, I tend to think, okay, women can do anything when empowered, when given the chance. You know, imagine
That's right.
you doing the news, you doing reporting, you know, juggle that with your family responsibilities, taking care of a son, you know, taking care of a son is not an easy thing, you know. Boys are different.
Especially the Ibrahimas.
You know, I looked
the
at,
one I had at home.
Yeah, I looked at Aisha, and this morning I was like, Aisha, you are talented. You do the news and you operate the camera as well. So women
She's an iron lady.
Yeah, women are talented. And
yeah, we can, for the fact that we can multitask, says a lot about women. I mean, it is said that a woman can get anything she sets her mind to, which I think is very, very important. And not just women, I think every individual, when you set your mind to something and you want to achieve it,
you achieve.
But it is in our nature as women to multitask. So
absolutely,
I guess,
so that is what it is. So Mr. Momodumboy, good morning. I mean, I can see you've taken that trend and the style of putting on this nice hat. It's a nice one, and I promised you last week I'll get you a few of these.
But I just put on my hat, whether it's a trend or not. I really do not know anything about that, okay? So you read into it whatever you will.
It's sort of a trend to me.
You've sent what? To people far and wide coffee? I'm sitting right here, I'm your guest, I can't get a coffee on this table.
That's not his fault.
Are you a politician of some
It's
sort?
not his fault, Mr. Bush.
Dañoo grève next time dañoo am coffee. As far as yaa ngi toog ci table bi fii di ko wax, next time we're gonna get some coffee for
Absolutely.
you.
I hope Bakari is watching.
How have you been?
Alhamdulillah.
That's
not complaining.
Yeah, nice. So on the program, we'll take a look at the African code. From the code, then we will dig into the newspaper review. I mean, interesting stories on already seeing them on the Fourier, and of course the Point newspaper as well. Assembly sittings, rejection of the you know, draft constitution, and of course, you know, Lawyer Dabo sending some comments to President Barrow and his government as well. So we will, you know, take a look at those things. And we'll be talking to the Ministry of Transport. They validated the Gambia Route Transport Bill 2025. New legislation will replace colonial era motor traffic. Matar Sise, Permanent Secretary, will be here. It's about time for us to take a look at these colonial rules that are put in place when it comes to certain acts in the Gambia. You can see there are acts that, you know, even when you happen to cause a felony at some point, even the charges are very minimal. You know, so these are things that should be reviewed. We'll be talking to the Permanent Secretary from the Ministry of Transport as well. So let's start with the code, Julde.
So our code this morning, it's not a Swahili one, Swahili one. It's a Yoruba one.
Yoruba.
So we have a better heart cannot taste sweet joy.
A
bitter heart cannot taste sweet joy.
Sweet joy. Mr. Mboj, law xam si proverb bi.
Wow, bitterness. It weighs you down, doesn't it?
Right.
You're blind to all sorts of things. And the good things can be around, but you're just so bitter. So you're seeing everything through that. So, little bit of gis around, I understand, yes. So letting go, cleansing the self first, then you can enjoy things. Otherwise, you'll just be a miserable git, as they say.
That's
really.
right.
Well, that's my intro, let's put it that way.
Intro.
Because you know how things can be.
Mom outro.
You just know how
wedding.
things can be. So, Baldaco, your view.
A bitter heart, cannot taste with joy, you know. It has to start from within yourself, to free up your mind.
Right.
Yesterday, in the evening, I was talking to Penda. We were sitting in the house, and there is a scenario that we discussed. And I said to Penda, do you know, these advanced countries, they have a place where people can go and sit and cry, just to relieve yourself. Or you go and start talking, just talking to yourself. You know, you sit at your own confinement and you start talking to yourself. You know, talk your problems through. You understand? Or you sit and cry. You know, at some point people will tell you, no, don't cry, just calm down, you know, be a man, don't cry. You understand? But these are things that you have to voice out. Let's take a look at the case of Pa Usman Juf. POJ, the late Fat Samba's husband. You know, I've seen a lot of comments about him on social media. Pa Usman, I think you're taking this too far. You're always, you know, talking about this, crying, you know, doing a lot of stuff. And, you know, for me, I do not blame Pa Usman. I think it's important for him to voice out and cry out his feelings so that he can be relieved. Sometimes this will weigh you down. You know, if you don't cry it out or talk about it, you just keep silent. There are people that you know they are going through a lot in life.
Right.
You know, so that heart will be bitter. So they won't even taste sweetness. You can see a person will go to a place that you know it is supposed to be a place to relieve yourself, a place to free up your mind.
Right.
But the individual will be just sitting put and concentrating on one thing, you know, thinking, you know, all the time. So I think it's important for one to relieve yourself.
Absolutely. I think I will take it from there. People are going through a lot, whether you know it or not.
True.
So the last thing one would want to do is to actually inflict pain on people or unnecessary stress on people, which I think, you know, it's unnecessary. And come no sometimes, you know, we have this culture of, okay, allow men are not allowed to cry, they are not allowed to complain. They're human first before being men or women. So I think that is important. You know, people should be allowed to actually vent their frustrations, their anger or whatever in the way that they please us, so long as it does not infringe on other people's rights or emotions as well, which I think it's important. If you feel like you need to cry, go in a place, confined place and cry. If you need that, if you think that you need to complain, you know, bring it out. It's important, you know, than keeping it in and you're causing more harm to yourself than good. Going back to the proverb, it's really apt because I don't think a bitter heart can ever taste as with joy. A bitter heart only sees negativity and you don't see the good in people. You don't even tend to see the good in your own self. So I think it's very, very important to actually, whatever you see in life, you have good and bad, you know, that is life. It's a combination of good, the bad, the ugly. You know, you just have to compromise and know when to actually deal with situations when you're confronted with, you know, something that is not, you know, within your own space and all that, or you don't like something that is happening. So, but again, you know, being bitter because of situations or scenarios, or because you've been betrayed by people time and again, I don't think that is necessary, because again, you're harming yourself, not those people. Being bitter does not really help the individual. It inflicts more pain, frustration, and at the end of the day, depression. You know, it does not necessarily harm Mr. Mboj. For instance, if I'm angry at Mr. Mboj, Mankomere and all of that, that is my bread and butter. If Mr. Mboj, it's not even paying. Maybe Mr. Mboj said, I'm not so much he's not even paying attention. But the moment I see him, I am always angry. I am always there. So I'm affecting myself more you know, by getting angry and all of that. So I think Lulu, it's very, very important. Sometimes, man, I am in a point in my life where I weigh my options. Like I decide, is this something that is necessary? Is it worth my time, or is it not worth my time? If it is not worth my time, trust me, feel whatever you want to do. I'll not even look at you. It doesn't even move me because it doesn't interest me.
True.
So I think that is very, very important. I used to be this sensitive person. Okay, Mr. Mboj suma mere sa I am concerned. Mr. Mboj ita mu mere ma wow. Dama ko feel. Uta mo Mr. Mboj mu war ma mere la ko def and all of that. But again, as time goes on, like Mr. Mboj suma mere, I feel like okay, defo makodara and all of that. That is your bread and butter.
It's your bread
and butter. Like you no kill me.
And put coffee. Ganango.
You smiling, but like look at you, examples to Mr. Mboj all the time.
Yeah, so that is what it is. I mean, an individual, you need to weigh what is more important to you, what matters to you the most, you understand?
Absolutely.
You see this thing you have here, that's the heart. There is nothing, you shouldn't compromise it for anything. Your mental health too is very significant,
it's
you know. So the best thing one can do is to walk away from all these things that weigh you down.
No, I see it slightly. I frame this whole thing slightly differently. I think.
You mean both my interpretation
yes,
about this?
Mainly. I think what this is pointing to is this. In life, I'm going to have disappointments, and I'll be hurt, and you go through all of that. That one takes it for granted.
Right.
So I think here what he's talking about is, now how do you deal with that? Given that it is going to happen, whether you like it or not, how do you deal with that? Am I going to be bitter about it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's essentially that, how do you deal with that? Because how you deal with that will determine everything else.
Right.
So if you want to cling on to all these negative things, you used the term earlier, it weighs you down.
Right.
How can you be happy when you are constantly, I don't know, full of resentment, anger, or you've got grudges? You know what I mean? Stuff like that. So it's just warning us about stuff like that.
Right.
Be careful with experience. Any bad situation you go through, yes, you need what they call catharsis, a way of dealing with it. Some people will go and cry.
Right.
You know, if that will give you catharsis, that's it. How do you reconcile, you know, in a positive outlook, bad experiences?
True.
I think that's essentially it. Then the bitterness, perhaps, you know.
Thank you. Thank you very much. On that note, Mr. Momodu Mboj will take a short break. After the break, then we'll delve into the... Okay, all right. So we will continue.
With the newspaper?
And we have quite interesting headlines on the Point newspaper. Alleged armed robbers reveal inhumane treatment at Mile 2. Assembly rejects reinstatement of diaspora voting. And we also have GRA generates 13 billion in 6 months, launches e-invoicing project. Dabo says 2024 draft doesn't reflect will of Gambian people. And court grants Pablo 25% access to seized funds in money laundering case. Dr. Cisse accuses opposition lawmakers for betraying Gambians. I mean, interesting headlines. Let's start with the Mile 2 Central Prison. This is perhaps the most alarming. It touches core justice core system and human dignity, inhuman treatment, which is
There's nothing new.
Yeah.
Remember the TRRC, what we heard, what you know, the sort of stuff that went on in Mile 2, and to some extent. I suspect that the worst aspects of that kind of treatment, they don't do it anymore, but still there are in many other areas.
You see, that TRRC revolution, it had an impact on me at some point. You know, when the guy said, at Mile 2 Central Prison, there are times that we have no option but to sleep in the toilets, you understand? So even if I get to a toilet, I reflect that. I mean, that comes to my mind. I mean, how were they able to manage sleeping in a toilet. I mean, it's really crazy. I think there should be an investigation into this. I mean, inhuman treatment.
And it's just sort of, we have a certain attitude towards people who tend to take too mild too. You know, criminals, people who break the law, and that sort of thing. And we punish. We are really very harsh. We can be very, very punitive. So we don't feel much for them, really. So however you treat them is fine. So this is what we do. Somebody once said that it's interesting, when you look at the people, if you see how they treat so-called criminals, that tells you a lot about their culture. So whenever I think about it, I'm like, oh, this is not very flattering on me. When we lock people up, they do not lose their humanity, they merely lose their liberty. So how do you provide them with reasonably decent stuff? I do not know. We just tend to punish them and we don't care what happens and that sort of thing. And that is the reality. How do you change that? I do not know.
Unfortunately, Mr. Momodou Mbodj, I mean, you'll only be able to deal with one story. I will take a leave of you.
Yes.
You know, we will... Mr. Mbodj, you're not going, you're staying. I mean, we're doing this together, so we are not leaving you. We'll take a short break, and after the break, then we'll continue with the newspaper review. We'll be back.
Hi there, my name is Nuruddin Adams, a proud product of this noble institution. Heritage Christian University is not just a learning place, but a community that transforms lives and empowers its students to become compassionate entrepreneurial leaders. My journey here has truly been life-changing, and I invite you to come experience the same. Whether your passion is into business, nursing, midwifery, psychology, communication studies, multimedia technology, information technology, or theology and ministry, Heritage has tailored these programs for both the undergraduate and graduate studies to suit your goal. If you're ever ready to take your education to the next level, then pick up an application form and join us today. At Heritage, you are never alone. As members of the community, we'll stand and work with you every step of the way. Welcome to Heritage Christian University.
We are back. You're watching QTV this morning. I am Ibrahim Balde. Now let's move on after that break. And we have Mar Nyang, founder and executive director, Gambia Participates. I mean, Mar, you are welcome on QTV this morning once again.
Thank you, Balde, and Assalamu alaikum to Julde and Mr. Mbodj.
Mr. Mbodj, Thai Imam. Gisuloo tay moo nekk imam ratib of Q group moo ñu dee jiite fii ñu jude. Is that funny, isn't it, Mr. Mbodj?
Why is it funny?
Dama gis nga ree. All right, so let's move on. We are talking about the inhuman treatment of inmates at Mile 2. There are people that you know they were incarcerated, and these are the people that you know, voiced out how inhuman conditions are at the Mile 2 Central Prison. I mean, we've seen the TRRC revolutions, we've seen a lot of inhuman treatment, and there was a visit, we've seen the conditions of the prison. Even if they are inmates, but they have rights as well. Mar.
No, yes, definitely. And that is the reason why the National Human Rights Council, part of its mandate in the NHRC Act of 2017, they were given that mandate to investigate human rights violation, which also include accessing detention centers and also prisons as well. And then also the Ombudsman ombudsman investigates administrative corruption. So you could actually relate that to administrative corruption, because if someone else is misusing their power to, inflict human rights violation on someone else, they are actually abusing their administrative position. So these are two institutions that I think they should investigate, and punitive action should be taken to those that are found guilty. The penalty of anyone found guilty is already decided by the court. That is to be sentenced to a particular period of time with labor or monetary fines. So that is the highest penalty that is given by the court. No other penalty should be imposed by any other person after the court has already given the verdict. So that is beyond the scope of prison guards. If they do that, I think they should be held accountable for that.
So Mr. Mamadou Mbodj, how will this impact, public trust on our justice system?
No, but I think sort of more fundamentally, I'll ask you this, Matt.
Okay.
With the TRRC, the testimonies, we heard all the ghastly, grisly stuff that happened over there. But then with the new Gambia thing, trying to reform everywhere, all the institutions. Yet, why are we still talking about it? Why is it so persistent that to treat people humanely in prisons?
Because we don't still have New Gambia.
Oh, you mean we're still pending?
Oh yeah, we're still pending. There's no New Gambia without a new constitution.
Okay.
So we're basically following the institutional setups that we inherited from dictatorship, right? The reforms have not been completely done, right? After the TRRC, we did talk about security sector reform. And Sheikh Mati once said this during the constitution, we want convergence, that to address constitutional reform, to address security sector reform, the foundation is the constitution, right? So we're not there yet. So these are the consequences of our ignorance in the way we deal with legal reform issues.
But isn't it, this is really the issue, isn't it sort of really like a mixed picture? Yes, formally, the formal steps, as it were, we haven't done there much. But as a journalist, I did it on the Jamia, I did it on the Barra. It's a massive difference. That's the reality. You know what I mean? So, yes, I understand the constitutional path has been very slow. Look at it, retarded twice, so scuppered. Yet, practically, there are changes. And my analysis of things must combine both to see the mixed picture that's unfolding. It is in the nature of transitional systems. You see this mixed picture. You're transitioning from one to the other, isn't it?
So you're looking at this at the journalistic lens. Perhaps he is looking at it at a broader
but this is the key. This is the mixture that I want to bring out.
No, with transition.
This is what I'm talking about.
I agree with transition from autocracy to a seamless democratic state. So obviously, I agree there has been some changes, right? But whether our systems have metamorphosed to be different from what we used to experience, in some instances, yes. In other instances, no, because the foundation is the legal framework.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can pinpoint, other things and try to similarize that with the former regime. There are changes, but not much changes as well. I know where Mar is trying to pinpoint.
So let's move on. We have quite some interesting headlines. Dabo says 2024 draft doesn't reflect the will of the Gambian people. Yesterday was the press conference, and he said that he is there unapologetic that the UDP NAMS rejected the draft constitution, the 2024 draft. Now, what's your take?
Which of the draft reflects the people's aspiration then?
The 2021, apparently.
Okay.
The 2020.
2020, yeah, that
right.
one.
So this is the confusion that I always have, right? The 2020 draft does not actually reflect the needs and aspirations of everyone. If you ask the Christian community, they will tell you they don't want that constitution. And that's the reason why in September 2020 they rejected that constitution before it was debated. They in fact called on parliamentarians to reject it. If you ask the Supreme Islamic Council, they didn't want that constitution. They rejected it. So for me, I'm confused which one is which. You call it the people's draft, but you have the two most influential groups in this country, the Christian community and the Muslim community, and they rejected it. So we need to stop the politics and then ask the right questions.
His argument was the fact that it was a consultative process and a democratic one.
All right. It was consultative, right? That is undoubtable. It was a consultative process. But if the Christians will tell you, we made submission that secularism will be there, were their position taken? No. The Islamic community said the language for marriage should be clear. Were their position taken? No. So obviously consultations are done, but the final verdicts are the ones who drafted it. So but it was good. It was a good constitution, but it's not a constitution that we can say it reflects the needs and aspirations of everyone.
It's not inclusive.
But if you were to make a comparison between the 2020 draft and the 2024, which one do you think stands the test of time in terms of democratic values and principles?
So that is a good question. See, the 2020 Constitution obviously has better democratic clauses than the 2024 draft. And that's the reason why in 2020, we advocated for the passage of the 2020 draft Constitution. Right? And what we were saying is the same thing that we said in 2024, allow it to pass and make the necessary adjustments and contentious clauses. So obviously 2020 is better than 2024. And that has to be clear. I've made this clear several times. I don't have to say that again. 2024 draft has good and not so good clauses. Now, for example, you ask the Islamic community, they said, okay, we are in support of the 2024 draft to be passed with adjustments. Why? Because the issue of marriage has been made clear. You understand? So this is a process where you cannot have 100% of the population supporting one thing, because you know what? Constitution is such a document that you will have certain clauses that is in favor of one group, but not in favor
of another group. Absolutely.
So that is how the process is. So there has to be consensus in the way this process
compromise
and compromise. And that is not what our politicians are ready. In 2020 they weren't ready for it. In 2024 they are not ready for it.
So it was a battle of NPP versus UDP.
And that's exactly what I wrote the
last time. Because they referred to it as
Barrow's Constitution
and Dabo's Constitution, a document that should have been a national document.
And that's exactly what I wrote last night, right? Just look at the time frame of all of the events that took place. You understand? 2020 draft was the 2019 draft was published in November, right? December 31st, Barrow announced the formation of the NPP, right? March 15, Barrow dismissed Ousainou Darboe. 2 weeks after, the 2020 draft came. September 2020, they rejected the draft. 2024 draft also came. So I made this conclusion that it is not lost for me to establish that this was a disagreement, right? Barrow, obviously, it was not lost to the public knowledge that he was not in support of the 2020 draft because he perceived it to be a document that is retroactively including his first term and preventing him from running for second term. And then certain powers have been taken away from him.
But now, where does that leave us for the fact that we are still governed by the 1997 Constitution?
But that's the thing. And then what happened was people felt for this rift and beef between Ousainou Darboe and Adama Barrow. And then people started taking sides. So if you support the 2020, they perceive you to be supporting the UDP. If you support the 2024, they perceive you to be supporting.
So you see, that's why the other day I talked about political maturity. We talked about it on the program. What will happen now to the Gambia if we are doing certain things and we don't reflect and put country first, and we are more driven by our political ambitions? What is going to happen to this country?
Let me just, before you come in, Mar, and here we're talking about two things, isn't it? Yes, we'll have our program, our agenda, that's one thing. And what's the strategy? So now let's go back to the National Assembly here. This is what you have, the 2024 draft. call it what you will. We all know, but this is what is. That's the reality, yeah? So now I, as UDP or opposition, whatever, how do I think about this? Now, if I reject it, what are the alternatives?
Yeah.
I'm automatically left with 1997. So strategically, really, when it's thinking about it, because look at us now, my rights, everything really, to some extent, depend on Barra's discretion. The law doesn't protect me in most areas. So strategically, what do you think about this, Mar, with UDP's position that they've rejected it, even though the possibility of 50+1, do you know perhaps how that could have played out in the next election? Well, that's an interesting one. How do you see this? As Swai Buture, the PDOIS member, said, don't allow perfection to get in the way of progress. It was a very interesting, subtle, nuanced observation of what was going on.
There's not going to be a perfect constitution. There's never going to be any perfect constitution.
Absolutely.
Right? And we are never guaranteed a constitution that will reflect the aspirations of every Gambian. So I think it was a miscalculation for many parliamentarians. Number one, because there are 3 core mandates of a parliamentarian. One is lawmaking, which is core. That's why they call them lawmakers. 2 is oversight, and 3 is representation. And if you look at those 3 mandates, right, it is in the center of what they were supposed to do with the constitution. First, as lawmakers, that bill was not the government's bill anymore. It was the parliament's bill. So parliaments will decide what to do with that bill, to perfect it, or to make it worse than it was presented to them. Number one. Number 2 is to exercise their oversight, right? The executive brought you a document, exercise your oversight and see what is good, maintain what is not good, you make it good. Number 3, represent the people in there, right? So I think, and I said this previously, if they reject the constitution without looking at its content, because this second reading was not to look at the content of the document. It was to debate on the principle whether the Gambia needs constitutional reform or not. And they voted by rejecting that Gambia does not need constitutional reform. That's what they voted in 2020. That's what they have voted in 2024. And 2020 to 2024, there's only one parliamentarian that voted against their political party. Right? So this is the reason why I say parliamentarians will not be allowed to be used by their parties. Right? The decision that they should make must be independent. We've done consultations across the country, and we've known and seen and heard what people were saying regarding the need for constitutional reform. What the parliamentarians did was to get trapped into this personal rift between President Barrow and Honorable Ousainou Darboe. And this is the whole problem. It was all personal. It was not about national interests. 2020, my way. NPP said no. NPP brought the 2024 our way. UDP said no. Where is the people? When were you when are we going to be given the opportunity to decide which of the 2 documents we want?
Well, we have to be fair to them.
That's
35 of them voted in favor. 21 against.
31 also voted
31.
The 2021 draft.
The threshold is very high. I suppose the threshold is quite high.
All right, so let's move on to the Foreign newspaper. Another one catching my eyes. I mean, woman arraigned for allegedly insulting the president under new law. What's your take, Mar?
Now you can't insult the
now
president.
When you insult the president, ministers, National Assembly members, I mean, you can be fined one. I mean, you can find one thing, and of course, it can attract penalties. I mean,
public law tends to regulate society, coexistence, and then prevent antisocial, and then also uphold our cultures and values. Insulting is not one of those. So that's basically not a bad law. If I insult you right now blatantly, you'll be offended naturally. No matter how thick your skin is.
No.
Right. So insulting is not good, and I think our religion, both our Muslim scriptures and then other Christian scriptures, does not condone it, and our society does not condone it.
Yeah.
So I think it is not a good attitude.
So, Mr. Mboj, where do we draw the line between criticism and offense?
I'm a skeptic of that position. How do I define insult? Imagine I say that A is stupid. I genuinely mean it. He cannot reason. Is that an insult? It will be a very, very difficult concept to tame. What is an insult? You know, one can use language in all sorts of ways.
What is an insult?
Offense. Who
to the
takes
new
offense?
constitution, to the new rules?
Yeah, and the fact of taking offense. God, that it's so subjective. One can take offense over almost anything. So to my mind, it's a dangerous route to take. In a liberal democracy, yes, today the media ecology is slightly different, as it were. So people are doing things that they shouldn't do, yet I'm not sure if insult really should be punished in that way. If you cannot take the heat, get out of the kitchen. You are in politics. Unfortunately, we don't like it, but this is the nature of politics as we see it today.
So you're saying that
around the world.
You're saying that if
like
I am
that
into
kind of
politics,
law.
I should be insulted, or my parents should
No,
be insulted?
you shouldn't be insulted. You're missing my point.
Okay.
It is what is.
You may be insulted.
This is what is. This is what I'm living. I analyze things as the way they are, not how they ought to be. We're all working for that, towards that, how things ought to be. But things are the way they are. Especially with social media, we're all complaining. How do you change this? The genie is out of the bottle. How do I respond to this new ecology, this new political, social, technological ecology that we live in? This is the reality of our age.
I think the problem with this new law is the fact that it is ambiguous in nature, and that was the stance of the Edward Francis Moore Center for Rights and Human Rights and Justice. And the law, for the fact that, like you mentioned, what constitutes an insult, it's not really clear. The law, it's ambiguous in nature. You know, you don't, whether you're stupid and all of that constitute an insult and all of that, it's not clear. So that provision should be made clear so that people know that, okay, if I said that automatically, I am liable. I can pay $10,000 or up to $50,000 or spend 6 months in prison.
Well,
but it's not clear.
I think I read something on the paper. I mean, it mentioned insulting parents, parental insults. That's what it states.
So what constitutes parental insult? That is the problem.
And even the lady, when I read the newspaper in the morning, what it said was, it was more of a mother, that type of an insult. That was...
Will you accept that? If someone insults you, we have to be reasonable. And we live in a democracy, right? Our society and the other democratic society are different. Right? Our values are different. In other countries, it is okay for you to do your insult. It is not okay in our country to be insulting, especially based on what you've just said. Insulting people's parents. That's not what our society condones. You understand? So it is not an ambiguous law. What should be clear, I have not read that part, if there's in any statute, there's a section called interpretation, right, where these nomenclatures are interpreted, right? However, if it's not clear, what we call gray area, then the court, the lady is arrested. It is the court now that will decide whether what the lady has done, right, is in violation of that criminal code, a specific clause on the criminal code. So that's going to be up to the court. But I think we should be responsible in the way we exercise our rights.
That's right.
And I think that is what our democracy calls for.
Right, that's true.
Absolutely. But there is this narrative that in our society, we don't take insults, we don't take this, we don't take that. Maybe other societies might, but I really do not know any society in the world that culturally accepts insults. I do not know any in the world.
No.
Depends on the level of the insult.
You see, now you're going to levels, but not the definition itself.
No.
Yes, if it is about degree of insult, which is quite different from the very concept of insult itself.
No.
So let us be careful here before we muddle ourselves into a law that we might regret tomorrow. Approaching public policy with a certain self-righteousness is the dangerous thing to do. It's a dangerous practice in the longer term. We all accept that.
But Mr. Mboy, in certain countries,
there's a moralistic approach
in
to
certain
politics.
We've seen
that's
people
working.
talking normally using the F word. But then it's normal using the M word.
They can even say that,
normal.
Mom, you're lying.
But
It's normal.
Here,
Can you say
if
that?
I use the
You can't
M
say
word
that.
on anybody else, it's not normal.
Yeah,
So the countries are always
I
different.
grew up in Banjul. Wa afday sagan day rek suba be gudi.
It's normal.
I mean,
That's normal in Banjul, maybe. Maybe
Come
Bobo
on.
Sagan,
These values,
Bobo Banjul.
they're universal. It's just each society at a particular moment.
Mr. Mboj, I disagree.
You know the hypocrisy, the thing
No,
that
dama
we
disagree.
Mr.
Why
Mboj.
haven't you in this society that we live in? I mean, let's be realistic.
There's a narrative.
Come there are certain insults you hamne. So ko defe ninyi nuñ la hole as a very disrespectful person. And you know, these are things that are not even allowed morally in our societies.
I hate insults. You don't hear me insult anybody. Kusaga sah madawla. We are not talking about that when I'm talking from a position of principle. You know what I mean? How much do I allow the state to control morality? That's a dangerous route to go. There's a minimalist, yes, in liberal societies. For minimal rules, interaction, peace take place. But where does it stop?
So let's move on to something very pressing. Diaspora voting, there's been a setback, Mar.
I think the 2024 draft allowed for diaspora voting, and apparently it is rejected now. So I don't know where that leaves diaspora voting now.
Diaspora voting.
Well, in the Elections Act, section clause 14 of the Elections Bill, accommodates for the diaspora voting, registration of diaspora. The ruling party actually voted against the removal. They voted for the removal of that clause, and the opposition voted to maintain that clause. We've done some work, and we've done some position paper, not some position, but a position paper telling parliamentarians that that particular clause is not in contradiction of the 1997 Constitution. It actually affirms the 1997 Constitution because the Constitution guarantees any eligible citizen age 18 and above to be registered and to vote. And then also in the Elections Act of 1996, it accommodates the voting of Gambians anywhere they are to vote in presidential elections. The Act made that clear. So what they are doing is, if you remove that, you are regressing and making our current electoral system worse than it is right now. And I think lawmaking should make current legal frameworks better, but not worse.
Thank you, Ma. Thank you, Mr. Mboj. We've already exhausted the time. We have another segment coming, and today the program is ending at 10. So thank you very much. But it is very disappointing. The diaspora contributes a lot in this country when it comes to remittances. So they should have their say in the choosing of leadership of this country. Yeah, so on that note, we'll take a short break. After the break, the program continues.
My name is Nuruddin Adams, a proud product of this noble institution. Heritage Christian University is not just a learning place, but a community that transforms lives and empowers its students to become compassionate entrepreneurial leaders. My journey here has truly been life-changing, and I invite you to come experience the same. Whether your passion is into business, nursing, midwifery, psychology, communication studies, multimedia technology, information technology, or theology and ministry, Heritage has tailored these programs for both the undergraduate and graduate studies to suit your goal. If you're ever ready to take your education to the next level, then pick up an application form and join us today. At Heritage, you are never alone, as members of the community will stand and work with you every step of the way. Welcome to Heritage Christian University.
We are back. You are watching QTV this morning. I am Ibrahim Abalde. Thank you very much for following this program, and to all our viewers on our social media handles. You can send your comments. You can send your comments on our social media handles. Facebook, we have our TikTok page as well, up and running. Now let's move on to the Ministry of Transport validates the Gambia Road Transport Bill 2025. New legislation will replace colonial era motor traffic. We have Matar Sise, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Transport. Mr. Sise, it's good to have you on this program.
Thank you very much for having me, and good morning to you and the viewers.
Yes. So how have you been? I mean, transportation is one of the most important in this country. And whenever we talk about transport, people talk about the Gambia Transport Union and the Ministry of Transport. Now, there'll be, you're validating the, it's already validated, right?
Yes.
The Colonial Era Motor Traffic, Act. So can you tell us, what are some of these things that are included in the new act?
Yes, thank you very much. As a ministry, we hold three portfolios. We have transport, public works, and infrastructure. But admittedly, transport dominates most of our work and our interactions. So what we have been trying to do is to look at the institutional framework to see how best we can actually create an environment that enhances our transport sector. And we work collaboratively with all stakeholders. And basically, when we initially did a study on the road transport, we found that there was a lot of inherent challenges. And some of it actually stemmed from the laws that actually guide or that helps to actually regulate enforcement, which is currently we are using the Motor Traffic Act, which is a 1948 law. And that is what still exists and governs how our road users and drivers actually interact with the infrastructure that we're building. And it's been a big challenge for us. As we probably have seen on the highway, there has been a lot of accidents, a lot of challenges in regards to enforcement. So working with stakeholders, including the World Bank, who are supporting this initiative, we came up we actually identified a consultant. And the consultant has been working to look at best practice around the world, around Africa, and to see how we can actually update this law that we had. And what they actually came up was with the road transport, bill. What we initially did was to do an internal validation within government, because it does actually affect ministries such as Ministry of Interior, the police, and then once we were able to refine the document, we then opened it up to external stakeholders. And we actually invited stakeholders from the transport union, from public sectors, the private sector, the civil service societies, and all stakeholders, including councils and others. And they provided feedback so that we can basically create a law that's fit for the whole of the Gambia.
So the Motor Traffic Act has been in existence since 1948.
Yes.
So why does it take this long, after 80 years, to totally look at and review to come up with a new law?
Yeah, so I think some of it has to do with the institutional setup. Initially, when the Motor Traffic Act was actually created, there was no Ministry of Transport. There was a Ministry of Interior that was actually given the mandate to enforce the act, and hence why the police are currently responsible for issuing license but also enforcing them. As we all know, this is not best practice, and if you just look at most countries, Senegal and others around the sub-region, even internationally, the police are not responsible for issuing license. So when the Ministry of Transport was set up, this is something that we have been trying to work with Ministry of Interior to make sure that we regularize this issue. And they have been very collaborative with us. So finally, what we are now looking at is how do we transfer that mandate, because there has to be a separation of powers. You cannot be judge and jury by issuing the license and then enforcing the license. We all know about the challenges we are having with people accessing the license, but also how they are actually tested, because as we know, currently there is no mandatory theory test for drivers, and it's becoming very challenging for us because we are doing all these road upgrades in terms of road markings, traffic signs, but a lot of our drivers don't seem to understand the rules of traffic. And so this is what this bill is seeking to address, among other issues.
So now who is going to be in charge of the licensing system?
So the idea behind the bill is that there will be a new authority, which will be the Road Transport Authority that will be set up. They would have mandates, so they will be responsible for driver licensing and registration. They will be responsible for vehicle licensing and registration. And they would also be responsible for issuing special license, for example, when you have truck drivers or other special operators that actually operate motor vehicles. And then what they will also do is that they will also champion road safety. So when you look at, for example, the Gambia, we have a very high accident rate, road traffic accident. And it's very unusual because we have been actually doing a lot to upgrade our infrastructure. But a lot of it, because when you look at accidents, there are normally three factors that contribute to accidents. One is the human behavior. So this is whether the driver understands the rules and actually behaved in accordance with how they're supposed to operate a motor vehicle. So this law actually reinforces that by creating a set standard for how you acquire your license, to make sure you are tested both in terms of theory and also the practical aspect of it. Then the other aspect that contributes to accidents is the condition or the roadworthiness of the vehicle itself. We have seen, unfortunately, for example, on the Battle Harden Highway recently, there was an accident where somebody was driving a vehicle until the wheel came off and it actually ended up killing a student. Now, these are the things that could have been avoided, because if we are testing these vehicles regularly to determine if they should be on the road and giving them the right certificate, then we can pick up and filter some of these things. So that's another issue. And the other aspect of it is we're also working very hard to make sure that we upgrade our roads in terms of road markings, street lights, and this actually enhances safety. So this is where this authority will be working on all those aspects of it.
So what is going to be the next step for the bill?
So as it relates to the bill, we have done the external validation, and we are very thankful to all the stakeholders that came and participated. Now, as a ministry, we will actually look at all the feedback, and there will be opportunities still for people to provide input. We will incorporate that, working with the consultant, and then the minister would then take it to cabinet for approval. Once cabinet reviews and endorses the bill, then it is tabled at the National Assembly to go through the ratification process. And once enacted, it then becomes a law.
So there are concerns that maybe with the coming of this bill, the transportation is going to be more expensive now. Who is going to regulate the issue of transportation in this country? Those are also the authority that is set up. Is it part of their mandate to also look at the whole transportation issue and also come up with regulatory frameworks that the drivers are going to actually adhere to?
Yeah, so as it relates to transport, there are certain provisions. For example, the provision for certain road transport tariffs is actually the Minister of Transport that is responsible for approving that. So that remains. What they would actually help to do is that they can always, once they have the bill, they can enact legislation. And this will, for example, help to define, for example, penalties that would be levied on people that actually violate the rules. But the enforcement will still remain with the police. So what will happen is that the agency will work hand in hand with this, with the police, to make sure that obviously they're equipped and they're actually given the relevant information to be able to enforce properly. And we see this working a lot in other countries where, for example, one of the things that we are looking at is working with the insurance companies to have an insurance database. So that way, if that is accessible, for example, to police officers, they can check and know which vehicles are insured and which ones are not insured. Driver's license to the same thing. They can know which drivers have a valid license or not. So these are all the things that we are looking at as part of this best practice to enhance cooperation and make sure that we remove the conflicts that currently exist.
So anticipated challenges in implementing these laws. What are some of those challenges?
Implementation has always been a problem.
Yes, as you know, it is something that is always very difficult because when you come up with change, people are always very resistant because sometimes people don't understand it. And I always say that for me, this is going to help all parties. It would kind of define the interaction between the police and the drivers, because there's always this issue where there's always sometimes issues or conflict that arises from how drivers complain a lot because the police are not being fair or consistent with them. So this will set those rules and define how the police should interact. It would also enhance the police, because one of the challenges is that sometimes police have no information or data available to them. Sometimes the time that you take to stop one driver, by the time you get the paper insurance and the license and all those things, you're really not working with a lot. So what we are trying to do is to introduce technology that will make their job easier. And also what we're looking at doing eventually is to digitize this interaction. So for example, enforcement, where you are given the opportunity, where you actually serve with a penalty, and you have the opportunity to go and pay afterwards, let's say through a bank or whatever. So this is something that will also help to remove some of the issues like corruptions and all those things that we actually face. So it is going to really enhance, but I think the resistance in terms of people not being used to, obviously, this new setup will be difficult. Institutionally too, we are also working with our partners to get support, because as we know, setting up authority in terms of the human resource and other capital expenditure can be difficult. So again, we are working with them and making sure that we have a strongly regulated body that really helps to make it easier. Because I always say, as people, either you're a driver or you're a road user, and this is something that's protecting all of us. Yes.
So in terms of for the drivers, because this is one aspect that the president of the General Transport Union, Omar Sise, have always been complaining for the fact that the transport, it's not regulated. Drivers do not have contracts to actually know what they should do, what they should not do, and all of that. So it's not regulated, sort of. That is why all these problems are happening. So as part of this bill, are you considering, formalizing this very important sector by giving drivers the necessary documentation to protect them as well?
Yeah, so if you look at one of the components of the bill is how do we classify drivers? So for example, there are different types of drivers. You have your private driver, your commercial driver, your truck operated driver. So what we are working to do is working with them. We can define this classification, and we can then also define the requirements, because you have to have a certain level of training and competency to, for example, operate a heavy goods vehicle. So they can work with us to help make sure that, for example, removing some of the accidents that we're having, we define exactly what's the standard that should be applicable, so that when we test people to make sure we give them that license, it meets the standard in accordance with, obviously, their experiences. The other thing too is that once you have this license and you are able to, for example, digitalize it, you don't necessarily need to actually, interact with the police based on, some of these challenges that we're having. Because if you're a transporter, time is of the essence. You don't want to be stopped on the road and then you have spending 1 hour, just trying to negotiate. If you are violated the rules and there's enforcement, the notice is given and the penalty is attached to the license. So that gives you the opportunity within 5-10 minutes, you know that, okay, this is what you've been penalized for. You can then continue your journey. And later on, you can then decide to go at your own time to go and make the payment. Or if there's, for example, a demerit point, you can actually, that can be applied to your license. So when you go for renewal, you're told that, okay, well, you have to pay this because this is the penalties that you have on your license, your fines. So this is something that will really help both parties, I think, make it more easier.
Exactly. So let's talk about public awareness when it comes to this new bill. I mean, are there, things put in place so that the public can know?
Know what the bill entails.
Yes. So what we have been doing is, like I say, we have initially been inviting institutions such as the insurance companies. We've invited the transport union, civil society. We invited the council. So all of them have a stake in this. And what we will also be doing is to try and promote it in the media. And also what we are looking at, because this is a continuous process. Once government has decided on the bill, it will go through the National Assembly. The National Assembly generally, once they do their first and second reading, they will refer to the subcommittee, and the subcommittee will also engage the people again to make sure that their views are also respected. So it's really a consultative process, and we are very, very open and accommodating to people's feedback, because we really want to make sure that we make this something that's a Gambian bill that works for all parties, and make sure that it kind of creates a fair and consistent environment for all road users. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of roadworthiness, I know you mentioned this earlier, but a lot of the vehicles that are plying the roads in the Gambia here are not roadworthy, you know, according to the World Bank report. So what are you doing about that? Because I feel like that is also a contributory factor towards the high rates of accidents we have in this country.
Yeah, it is significant, because as we know, vehicles with the modern day technology, they have evolved and they're much more safer. So sometimes it is, for example, as we know, when the rules came in for wearing seat belts, some vehicles still don't have provisions for seat belt.
Yeah.
So and we know that it actually helps to contribute to saving lives, especially when there's an accident. So what we have been looking at is, for example, if you look at our neighbor Senegal, they have a requirement whereby vehicles that are older than a certain age are not allowed to be imported. Yeah. So initially it was 10 years, and then eventually they reduced it to about 8 now. We are also looking at that. I think, and in the bill, it's actually saying that we should look at limiting the age of vehicles that are coming in. Also, if you look at it, the vehicles sometimes that do come in have actually had accidents, and they're actually brought in as salvage vehicles. And when they come in, we just fix them and put them on the road. But nobody's tested to say, okay, well, after the accident, has it been tested to make sure that everything is working in accordance, with the manufacturer's requirements? So this is, again, another requirement that will be put in to make sure that, so what we are looking at, this authority can partner with stakeholders. So for example, garages that are given special permits, and they can actually test vehicles. So for example, you can say when a vehicle is new, you don't need to test a brand new vehicle for the first 3 years. But after the 3 years, every year from there on, it has to be tested by a mechanic, and it has to be certified by the mechanic to say that all the key components like the lights, the brakes, for example, now we are in the rainy season, a lot of vehicles don't have wipers. So these are the challenges that we're facing. Yes. So these are the things that we're trying to embed and make sure that we regulate properly as part of this provision to make sure we have road safety.
Does this bill also address the issue of border harassment and unnecessary delays? Because over the past few years, I think there has been a lot of push and pull, between Gambia and Senegal when it comes to the border. Is this bill, does it have any provision that is addressing border issues as well?
Yes, it does help. For example, if you look at the border currently is shut overnight. And one of the issues that Senegal has been grappling with is, for example, the issue of passenger vehicles traveling on their roads at night, because they have had some very serious accidents and where a number of people have been killed. And we have been trying to work with them because, for example, we want to open up the border. I mean, there has to be movement of goods and services to help the economy. But what they always say is that they don't want the vehicles that are carrying passengers to go on their roads at night. And we are trying to see, okay, how can we make sure that we work with them to address some of these issues? Because it's always a road safety aspect of it. So, for example, we are very hopeful that if we have this license, and what ECOWAS is doing is to standardize the documents. If you look at passports, driver's license, ID cards. So once you have all of these things that are standardized, it also makes it easier. Because, for example, if you have a Gambian license and you go to Senegal and you commit or you violate the rules there, there has to be a way for which they can also penalize you, because then there can be a collaboration to say, okay, likewise, if you have a Senegalese driver's license and you come to Gambia, we can also penalize you by having that cooperation between the systems, and it makes it easier. So these are the things that will also really enhance the cross-border transport.
Okay. So in terms of penalties as well, because I think it's very important, the reason why a lot of drivers are found violating this traffic act or regulations is the fact that the penalties that are attached there are not strict. So as part of this bill, are you looking at stricter penalties in order to help drivers to also be mindful of what they're doing? Because some of these things are so intentional that you realize that it's deliberate, because there are no regulatory frameworks in place to actually tie these drivers to a corner to say that, okay, you have to be careful when you're driving.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what we are looking to address here, because like we said, the law being a 1948 law,
Yes.
the situation regarding road transport was very different, and the circumstances were. Now we have first-class roads, for example, the Battle Hardy, yet we see a lot of issues, for example, reckless driving, and then we have a lot of damage to our road infrastructure in terms of the traffic lights, the barriers and stuff like that.
Right.
And sometimes, I mean, most recently there was this incident, like we have this epidemic of drifting on our roads.
Yeah.
And when you look at when people are taken to court and prosecuted, the fines sometimes do not reflect the actions. And this is what we are hoping to address. Because really, if you cannot penalize people appropriately, then they will take note. And it's a way of influencing people's behavior. Because if you know, for example, even things like parking. Gambia currently, we have people just wherever, even on the highway. I mean, the police have been trying to, they just park wherever they want to park. But if you start putting penalties attached to that, they would take they'll be conscious of that, and they'll take note of the issue. And eventually you can influence people's behavior. And this is what we are working with. And what we are looking at is how do we set up basically a tariff or a penalty that reflects our reality in terms of our economic realities here. And I know the transport union in particular are very passionate about this, but we are working with them to make sure that we have something that reflects the modern day challenges that we are having.
Thank you very much, Matar Cisse, for coming, Julde.
Well, this is all we have.
Yeah, so
Thank you. Okay, this is all we have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
We are hopeful.
Yes.
This is going to be a success, and it's going to change
really
the status quo of transport system in the Gambia. And consider building car parks at different locations as well, because if you go to places like Banjul, it is congested. People park everywhere. So it's also another form of generating income for the Ministry of Transport for national development. Yes, thank you, Mr. Cisse.
No, thank you very much
Yeah,
for having me. Appreciate it.
This is all we have for you until we come
again
tomorrow
Yes.
for another edition.
Bye-bye.